So,
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Nicole.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Okay, so what are we going to do today? We're going to first approve minutes. Then I think, Mariah, you're on the schedule for a presentation. And then Sadaf wanted to have us go over, I guess, the topics we've been covering and try to focus things down a little bit, talk about ultimately the types of things we might be looking towards writing up. So why don't we start with the minutes? Has everyone had a chance to read them?
Yes.
Any comments?
May I make a motion to approve the minutes of December 19th?
Second. Okay, I'll call the roll. Dick?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
The chair votes yes.
Cliff, let me just ask, who's
taking minutes?
I was gonna just volunteer for that. You beat me to it, Dick.
Excellent.
Because I have only taken minutes once, so I'm sure it's my turn again by now.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Of course.
And I think I probably have the next go round in that case.
Perfect.
So Mariah, I guess you were down to discuss the issue of teaching loads.
Yeah, but I'm not ready yet. I had this grand dream I was going to do it today. Dick sent me a whole bunch of the collective bargaining agreements, which was super helpful. But they are, as many of you I'm sure know, like very long. And I was using Claude to summarize them, but I don't want to trust Claude to without double checking the work. So I need to go back and read everything. So I'm just not ready.
Great, thank you.
Jeff,
right.
Jeff, wait a minute. Jeff, I'm going to take the minutes for today.
Too late.
Don't be so
I'm
sure.
sorry.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to number 4, review of focus areas / plan for the school subcommittee. I'm going to share my screen because I've got a list of topics that I've reviewed or Sadaf went over with me before she left. And then we can sort of use that document as a starting point for conversations. So let me do that. Okay. Can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. So the first 5 or 6 items are topics that we have sort of discussed or people have taken responsibility for. And I think they all need some additional work. We're going back for a second round. But let's go through them. And if anyone disagrees about whether or not we should be focusing on the topic, we can discuss that. So the first is the beep analysis, and Jeff, that's the one in your court, right?
Yep. I have done a little bit more looking, and I think that we put that on the calendar for maybe next week. I think that Sadaf had a calendar for coming back around on stuff, but regardless of where it is, I still have it, still in progress, and it wasn't for tonight, so it's for next week or 2 weeks from now or something like that.
No, it definitely was not for tonight.
Right.
And so just as a conversation point for everyone, does everyone still believe that the beep analysis and the potential opportunity there or not is something that the subcommittee should continue to look at and should include as part of whatever write-up that we do. That's really the basic question. I see Jeff nodding. I will
I was
nod.
going to say, I won't say anything because it'll obviously be biased, but I mean, I'll go last. How about that?
Oh, I'll go first. I mean, I personally have always had an interest in this, and I think that we should do it. I think regardless of what the conclusions are, that it is a worthwhile discussion and analysis for the community to be able to look at. Dick or Mariah?
I agree. I have not heard any cogent argument for not including it. So
I feel now that I know, or at least what I understood from the last meeting we had, that school committee members and select board members are not supposed to be authors. I don't know that I should be like weighing in either way on this comment, on this topic. Does that make sense?
Authors or voters? I thought
I thought it was both.
Okay, that's fine.
Chaz, did I understand that correctly? The conversation last time? I understood that we were neither nor.
I think based on that conversation, my understanding of it was that the elected officials are typically not authors or voters on these things, but that isn't to say that their input isn't important.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's where I think it's kind of that line drawing exercise can be tough in the sense that you don't want to say, oh, I'm moving a committee in this direction without having voted for it or what have you. But I think your input on this is still, as
I don't mean to not provide input on it, just that like whether or not it should be included in the report and investigated by the committee to me seems to be on the side of like writing.
procedural. Yeah. I see what you mean.
Okay. Mariah abstains. Okay. Jeff. Okay.
And can I just say, to be clear, like I have a lot of opinions on this, and like really it's about like pre-K is a societal good, and who should have access to that and where and how, but like that's more complicated than like the strict financial analysis that this is looking at.
Agreed. Okay, number 2. Dick's work on steps, lanes, healthcare costs, other major drivers, I guess, is what we consider to be on the school side. Dick, you want to give us any sort of update as to where you are and
sure.
your
Well,
thoughts on this?
I mean, you've basically seen the work that I've done to this point, and I will say that I am going to put together in the process of putting together some questions to try to flesh out the on both the town side, Chaz, and on the school side, the basis for the numbers, for the gross numbers that we saw in the forecasts presented by Dr. Givens and presented by Melissa, in terms of the assumptions of steps, lanes, the impact of those. I would add the impact of breakage on the term that the school uses for more senior employees leaving and being replaced by more junior employees, and obviously healthcare costs being an incredibly significant driver of increased costs going forward, and the 83-17% split. So these are all, I think, clearly issues with a huge fiscal impact, which is what we're supposed to be looking at, and issues that I think we have to address.
Can I ask a related question on healthcare? Um, and I think this is to you, Chaz. Um, have have overrides ever been structured such that indirect costs, such as benefits, are one of the items on the override? So, for example, like core town benefits, or I'll say core town activities, core school activities, and then to fund the above and beyond costs of health insurance, for example, as its own like item. I think Dick was alluding to this a little bit in earlier conversations. I'm not exactly alluding to this, but Dick was saying, well, we could fund, and I'm gonna probably misquote you, Dick, but hopefully I'll get the like general direction of what you were saying was like, we could fund a 4% increase, or we could put 4% on the ballot, and everyone needs to live within the 4%, and that would sort of bring people to the table. But I guess my question is, rather than structuring it like that, could you structure like health insurance costs are going to be X% if we don't negotiate lower? Do you understand what I'm trying to say, Chaz, of like splitting out the healthcare costs
Yes.
from the other costs? Because I think part of the problem, as we're all alluding to, is like FY27, the reason that neither the town nor the schools got any increase was because of increased healthcare, principally
Correct.
costs.
Yep.
So do you see what I'm saying about, can an override be structured to separate out? And I even read, there was a Globe article today about healthcare costs, and I thought one district or one town actually put healthcare costs on the ballot as an
Yep.
override item. So I guess
Yep.
I'm just wondering how that could work here.
It can be done. One of the things that we are building in as part of the base cost on the town override, that 3.1 million, is this increase in healthcare costs, right? That's lumped into that group. We can break that out. We can show that. And we can show the assumptions that we are making in FY28 and 29, which is we're going to see 12% increases for the next 2 years, which is,
So you're rolling it within the town portion, or you're rolling the town portion of the benefits within the town portion?
we're rolling the town portion of the benefits within the town portion. That's what we've got in there. It's that overall healthcare, those overall healthcare costs are part of that analysis. So we are trying to, and Melissa and I can break that out and kind of show what we're trying to do on that front. But the healthcare is part of that base. It's part of the fixed cost that we can't control. I think the issue you run into, to your point about, the theory of we can say 4% and you got to stick within it, is a method that can work with things that we have some discretion over. But with healthcare, because of the GIC and the structure there, there are very few levers we can pull. We can, because we're part of this broader group, we can't, for example, say, in fact, we're locked in on 2-year cycles, so we couldn't this year. Theoretically, we could give notice next year and go out to the market and see what we could find. But the fact that no one is even approaching us and asking us, hey, would you like to strike out on your own? Would you like to join one of the other consortiums? Is pretty indicative of how bad the market is out there. For almost every community, except for those small communities that are stable enough to be self-insured, the GIC has kind of been the best bet in town. And so we know that we are expecting, based on what our healthcare consultant has told us, that we can see these double-digit increases for at least the next couple of years. What we don't know for certain is, well, what happens if that number is 14%? What happens if that number is 15%? I think 12% is conservative, and conservative in the sense that it's good. It's not overly optimistic. It is realistic based on what we have been seeing in the past several years. It's not 19%, which is what some of the communities, for example, that are in Maya are seeing. But it's based in solid fact. I just worry that in those instances, when you break that out, you say we're expecting 12% increase. What happens if you hit that 14 or 15% number? In our case, what we're trying to do is backstop that a little bit by looking at some of these costs that don't come online until FY28 and 29, and building a contingency into the override budget. That's what we've been working on the town side, is this idea of having money in the event that some of these fixed costs go above and beyond where we think they're going to come down. So that's how we've been structuring it on the town side. But there's no reason why we couldn't break that out. We could say, this is the cost of healthcare. It's X. It applies to both town and schools. Here it is.
So,
So
but
Chaz, go
can
ahead.
I just
Go
ask,
ahead.
but
Yeah, go ahead, Mariah.
what if the question were, we will maintain, I'm making this up, but like, vote yes if you want to pay for the 83, continue to pay for the 83-17 split. And if not, then the split, if this vote fails, then the split goes to, and I'm making it up, 80-20 or some other split, because we don't have the money for the health insurance.
So in order to make that happen, the unions have to agree, right?
Right.
We cannot unilaterally force them to go to 80-20 or any other number. We have to work collaboratively with them. And I can't go into detail about the collective bargaining process. We're having those conversations. We're having those conversations independently of this override conversation. We're trying our best to figure out ways to make that movement happen, but it is a slow process and it is going to take time. I don't necessarily, I wouldn't be, I don't know if we could put on the ballot a question like that, because the unions have the veto power, right? They have the ability to say, if they hold together, no, we're not going to accept 80-20, 75-25, anything like that. And you're just going to have to find the money somewhere else. So I would,
And let me just say that the option obviously is to say, if you're going, given the impact of healthcare costs on the fiscal deficits, and the fact that there's this 83-17 split with the employer paying 83%, and that other communities have moved to two things: a lower percentage overall, or a lower employer percentage for the more expensive PPO plans and a higher percentage for the less expensive HMO plans.
right.
We could say the override will fund, to pick an overall number, as Mariah said, 75-25. And if that's not negotiated, the savings are going to have to be found somewhere else, and that could be a reduction in force, for example. But when we're in the position of looking at the fiscal impact, I don't think you could. I mean, in my mind, I don't think it's reasonable to say you take the 83-17% split as a given how expensive it has been and how generous it is.
And I think that's absolutely something we should be discussing both here and in the full committee. What I will say is we've done the math. Roughly every single percentage point is a little over $400,000.
Okay.
So if you were to move from 83-17 to 80-20, that would put over $1.2 million, and that would go through the split. That would be split 60-40 schools in town, 59-41 schools in town. But that's roughly what each percentage point is worth. And so we can get you it's a little over 400,000. We can get you our most recent calculation on where we think that would put us. So it's not nothing, it's significant. And it is.
There also, Chaz, might be a behavioral impact in the fact that if the split changed somewhat, you might find people migrating. And I don't know the numbers, but one of the questions I'm asking,
right,
or will be asking, is what are the numbers? With people migrating from the more expensive PPO plans to the less expensive plans if they have to pay a larger percentage. So
right.
there are different levers that can be pulled.
Yes. And we, for example, I will say that we don't expect, what happened 2 years ago was that there was a large scale consolidation of healthcare providers, right? You had all these different providers come together. They started offering, unified plans. We had a lot of mergers, people dropping out of the market. And so in that way, we actually saw some benefit in the sense that when everything shook out, more people wound up on plans that cost less money, even though the overall cost of the plans in the aggregate went up. We saw some benefits that were helpful to us in terms of balancing the budget, particularly when we were looking at the police contract. That's those kinds of the sifting there that happens as a result of the mergers and plans has settled at this point. I do think it's possible, and we can get you that to the extent, and you have to be careful too, right? There are people out there, there are plans out there that are not heavily subscribed. And so we have to be careful about people's personally identifying information about, who's subscribed to what plan and so forth. But generally speaking, we can get what information we can provide to you, we will provide to you in terms of where the subscriptions tend to lie, what types of programs they tend to be in, and how that shift may impact them. The other argument that we make on this is, on average, if we shift this percentage point away, it's an increase in withholdings of roughly an average of $5 across people's paychecks. And most employees are paid weekly, so that's $20 a month per percentage. And that adds up. We are particularly cognizant of how that adds up for our lower wage workers, laborers, folks that don't have folks who are either at the top step of their pay scale or who don't have steps at all. There are some positions that don't have steps at all in the town, at least on the town side. And, so we don't take that lightly. But that is something that we have been trying to, demonstrate to employees in terms of the overall impact to them going forward, that the withholding here will not be, it's not nothing, but it's not, on that kind of large scale order of magnitude. It's the cost of $5 a week.
Have cafeteria plans been discussed with the unions, cafeteria type plan, or is that just simply not in the cards?
I have not had that discussion. I don't know what our capacity is for that kind of plan style within GIC, candidly. So I would need to do a little more research about whether or not that's even possible.
Okay.
What's a cafeteria plan? I'm not familiar with that term.
It's essentially the employee is provided a lump sum and they can spend it how they want to spend it.
I see. Thank you.
Like going to a cafeteria.
I do think, though, Chaz, just to go back to this, like there needs to be more socialization among the public and everyone, that like a huge part of the problem that we're having is healthcare costs and not necessarily profligacy within the overspending within the schools or the town on sort of core functions. So to the extent that you can pull out healthcare costs as opposed to embedding it, even if it's like, we have you call them fixed costs, they're not fixed costs, but I'll call them indirect costs or whatever that are above the line costs, right? Like to the extent we can say, we need this because health insurance is projected to go up at 12% or for the next 3 years or whatever it is. And based on that Globe article today, I mean, I was shocked at what some of these communities were paying in increases. There was multiples that were paying 18, 20. One of them, I think, had a 40% increase in a year. They had two separate increases. So I think that needs to be contextualized to the public, that this is not a Brookline problem, but a broader problem, but it's also not a core school, core town spending problem. This goes above and beyond. This, again, is above the line. And so to the extent that everyone understands that, I think that's an important message for people to understand and to have it be very clear in the materials that you and Melissa are providing, and as this committee is presenting its work.
one of the things that I'm planning on doing, I realize I'm taking you far afield, I apologize. But one of the things that we're going to do on our end, we do a Budget 101 presentation every year. We do it online. We promote it with the League of Women Voters and other, good government organizations, try and get that message out. I'm actually going to do that several times this year rather than just once. And I'm going to try and basically take it on tour. I'm going to take it to the senior center and to Putterham and, do that in as many places as possible to your point, educate folks about what the drivers of costs are, not talk about it in the context of, and this is the override XYZ, but really give people an understanding, because I do hear from folks all the time, well, how much money do you spend on consultants? I can tell you how much money we spend on consultants. On the operating budget, close to nothing. It's not, that's not the problem. The problem is healthcare. And so making sure people understand that is important, and we want to get that message out there.
So I would add that insofar as we are price takers in terms of the premiums that are being assessed to the town, as Mariah had indicated, the split between employer and employee is something that is not something that is a given. Just like the salary increases are not a given going forward. So there are levers that can be pulled going forward.
I'm not sure that salary increases are not a given. I mean, if you're a union, your salary increases, assuming you're not top seven.
Once the contract is agreed to, correct.
Sure.
But insofar as we're in contract negotiations, we've talked about the impact of steps, it's 6, 7, 8% as opposed to a nominal 3% COLA when you add the step in. So it's a significant impact. Okay, so that's it on number 2.
Yeah, great.
Sorry, Cliff, for taking it far afield, but it was my moment to bring it up. So
yeah, no worries. So number 3, Mariah, this is perhaps broader than what the topic was that you were.
Yeah, I was wondering about this. I was like, what's some of this is new. Okay.
So I guess my understanding was, or our understanding was, you're looking at teaching loads as part of what you were doing.
Yeah.
And staffing levels. If you can't do comparison communities, we certainly need comparisons relative to our own history.
I can. Do you want me to show you really quickly what I have? I just need to clean it up some. Would that be interesting now, or do you want me to wait?
I'll leave it up to the group.
Why don't I just pop it up really quickly just so you can see what it looks like?
Okay.
And
Sure.
then, so right now it's too long, but basically I don't know how many pages it is, 15 maybe. But it's because we wanted to know the high school teachers. So I had Claude go through and basically look at some of them, but some of the stuff they have here is not necessarily relevant yet. So I want to clean up and just look at exactly what are the relevant bits that they have. So it's like, you can see Cambridge, Milton, Newton. I had it do citations so I can go back and check on what they are. But like things like this is like so we were talking about, this is Newton. This is like one of the workloads. So it's required to teach 4 course loads, right? And other teachers teach 5. So this is sort of the kinds of things that we're interested in. Some of them are less interesting, like student instructional time. It doesn't have to do with workload. So basically it picked through hundreds of pages, and I just want to go through, ensure that they're accurate. And I have them for each district. Some of the formats were different because the documents were so long that Claude wouldn't do all the documents in one go. I had to get it to, like, it caps out at a certain level of credits. So, but anyways, it gave me citations for everything. I'm just going to skim through them and see what's relevant and sort of boil it down. But I have it for all of the comparable districts, and it's 13 pages long, I guess. So it's here, it's close, it just needs a little bit of cleanup.
Yeah, all right. Great. And I guess the other question is, and you could say you hadn't really thought about this or it's not part of what you're doing, is just the administrative levels at in town versus other communities. And this came up because I guess someone mentioned to someone the view that we're admin heavy, and particularly at the high school. I have no opinion about any of that, but that's why that is on there.
I don't know
So
what that means. Like, I don't, I mean, I guess I could understand theoretically what they mean, but I'm sort of vague. Like, if we have someone who's, I'm just going to pick an example, like a 0.2 FTE because they oversee some sort of specialized program, like, I don't know, Winthrop House or something, which isn't a 0.2 FTE, that's a full-time person, but some sort of something like, is that what we're counting? I just don't quite know what they mean or how I would even find like other specific, I just don't even know how to measure that, frankly,
Right.
or how they have come up with that determination, whoever they are.
yeah, it's a really good question. Not someone I've spoken to. I want to let you know that because otherwise I'd be more informed. So I don't have a good answer. I guess off the top of my head, you know, people would say, okay, there are teachers, and then there are other professionals.
Everybody else. Yeah.
Which isn't the case. So like, and for example, like the deans, as far as I know, are 0.8 and teach 0.2. So like, that's just my point being, like people aren't just teachers or admins. Like many other things, like people think they're black and white and they're not necessarily black and white the way they think.
Okay, well, I think that's the type. Actually, it's a good piece of information to explain to people. You know, to actually have in the write-up something about when you're going over teaching loads, we can introduce the topic of administrative, you know, and explain to people how things work and how they don't work, that they're not black and white. Because I know that there's so many things that people have perspectives on that aren't fully informed. And part of the benefit of going through this sort of an exercise is actually to be able to educate people. So let's
It
just
might fit better in the conversation around fractional FTEs. Bella, are you there? I know you were here earlier. Do you know, was anyone able, I know you are being interim HR director right now. Was anyone able to pull the fractional FTEs? I can't imagine, like the staff by fractional FTE.
No, I'm afraid no one did.
Okay. Is there any chance you think to get it? Because I think we could definitely draft something that sort of covers this very quickly, but
Can you so you are looking, can you send an email exactly what you're looking for?
Yeah.
And I'll see, obviously people know this. Susan's out too. And I'm now short an HR director for the foreseeable future. So I'm gonna see who on staff could do that work other than Susan.
okay.
Okay.
I'll send a quick note with that. But and it would just be that because I can write the description of the fact that like people have different roles and they aren't just admin or just
Are we looking at just the high school?
I think for this question, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
it was, that's, as I understood it, that was the comment that someone made that was directed towards the high school, right? And what goes on at the high school. And again, I'm just sort of like,
Yeah.
so it's telephone here, right?
Yeah.
I think my guess, because I had been looking at this too. So this is just from the book that's gives all the goodies. This was all of the staffing analysis by FTE at the high school and the change over the last few years. So I think the discussion was, is there a column that has to your point, Mariah, this is the number of FTEs that are considered whatever someone wants to chop it up to. And I think unless we have a, teacher versus non-teacher, or, essential versus non-essential, or whatever categorization, then, I mean, this is a pretty good breakdown of what we have. So I don't know. I'm just going to pose back to the, subcommittee, like, if we have a very specific thing, like if we know what admin means, like how many deans are there, then I think we could answer that. But I think it might be a whole lot of work to try to break it out into categories if we don't have some specific ones that we're
I was
shooting.
definitely presuming we were not
Yeah.
going to, that we were essentially going to explain. I have an old table that sort of gives like 0.2 for this program, 0.2
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that program, but like it's a little out of date. But more importantly, to your point, Jeff, like I mean, I guess I have a question about elevating. I don't quite understand the value of elevating like one person's offhand remark into a section in a report. That's my
Fair.
Yeah.
The one question that had been raised earlier, Mariah, was the question of whether, and this is true on both the town side again and the school side, is whether we had 0.5, 0.6
That's what I was just talking about with Bella to
as
get that data, because she said no one
as
was able to pull it yet
you
because
know
they're down
fully
at an
full,
HR director.
benefited part-time individuals
Right.
was the issue.
Mhm.
Yeah, as opposed to the issue that Cliff has just alluded to. And I'm
But
not
with
sure.
that said, I think sort of fractional employment is a whole area that people don't understand. And so we can sort of talk about these things in the same bucket, is what I was saying. Like, there's something about people who are, you think, oh, it's a 0.2 administrator, but no, they're only a 0.2 administrator because they have a 0.8 job doing something else.
Right, which
yeah.
is fine.
Right.
That's I think a non-issue. But again, kind of putting benefits front and center. If there are 2.5 people, as opposed to one full-time person performing a function, is that necessary? Because then you're providing benefits to two people as opposed to one person, and we know what benefits are costing. So,
Mhm.
okay.
Okay. Next topic is the alternative school models. This is
Cliff, will you pull your document back up? Just so I can see it again.
can you see it?
No.
No.
Okay, so
We can see you, Cliff.
all right.
When
all
I
right.
shared my document, it
Yeah,
knocked
it
your
killed your
document out.
share. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
There we
There
go.
you go.
Yeah.
All right. Alternative school models. This is what Sadaf and Sid are working on, and I know Sadaf has they have a first rough draft, but they don't want to circulate anything until it's refined a little bit. Sid, do you have anything you want to say about that right now?
No, we have a pretty good draft going on right now. Sidaf and I communicated over the break to polish it up. I think we are supposed to speak about it either next week or the coming week.
Next week.
Next week. I think we'll have it ready before then.
Okay. After our building usage, it's probably the wrong term to use. It's really just better utilization of town facilities, including school buildings. This is something that I've been spending some time on with a couple of parents who have an interest in trying to come up with a better approach to building utilization than the town currently has. And they are coming at this from the perspective of not just parents, but coaches for rec sports, the high school sports, and just their impressions and what they've run into in terms of how difficult it is to understand what buildings are open, what fields are available, when they're available, who to call, whether or not there's a consistent application of rules and approaches across the town and the schools, and whether or not we are maximizing the revenue opportunity that they feel is rather substantial. So I hope to get some actual hard numbers from them, or at least their estimates. Certainly have a write-up. And if I'm able to get some numbers from them, then it'll be a more effective presentation, I believe. But even without the numbers, I personally agree that there's something here that needs to be evaluated in a way that hasn't been done before. Just from a management and utilization, transparency, efficiency basis. So keep you posted on that. Any questions before I move on?
I have a comment on that, which is, well, I think that, well, I'll let it go. Keep
Okay.
doing what you're doing.
Out of district revenue opportunity, use of empty classrooms, expanding, bringing tuition paying children from other communities. This is something Sadaf's been looking at. She does not believe that she should be spending a lot more time on this at this point in time, while we wait for Dr. Schmuckler to refine the work that she's doing here, and to make a presentation about, obviously to the school committee, about her ideas and where that might go. So it's here, it's on the back burner a little bit, but do want to bring it up and mention it.
May I ask whether this subject is an issue that Dr. Schmuckler is looking at, or is she just looking at servicing our current students, or our anticipated in-district student body?
For number 6 you're talking about?
Pardon me?
Sorry?
For number
Number
6.
6.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 6, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's coming to finance next week for fee calculation or fee acceptance. Because the school committee needs to approve any fees. At least that was what I understood. Is that still the plan, Bella?
Yeah. So next week at the scheduled subcommittee meeting, the proposed tuitions are going to be presented for, I guess you would approve them to be brought to the school committee as a whole.
Yes.
Is that right, Mariah?
Yes.
Yeah. So Susan was going to check with you on process and talk to you more directly.
We didn't connect today, but we're going to connect tomorrow.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm just letting everyone know that there's an expectation that Susan will talk to Mariah directly. And but I know that that is definitely something that will happen at next week's meeting.
And I guess one question is whether or not the idea is to utilize excess capacity that currently exists within the programs here, or whether or not there's the idea of expanding our capacity and bringing in even more children. And we don't need to have an answer to that now, but I do think that's the type of question that someone might ask after the schools decide what it is they want to start with.
For FY27, we are looking at bringing students for tuition within currently operating programs. And so we're estimating what the capacity is for taking in more students. I would caution I mean, but for FY27, that's what we're looking at. I think you're wondering if we could add more like new classrooms just to do that, or expand for programs we don't already have. So usually the financial model that justifies creating an in-district program is that we are avoiding the cost of sending those students out of district. So a big part of the financial justification for having these programs is that we would have had students that we would have sent out anyway. When we create the tuition for bringing in students from other places to the programs that we have, we're not allowed to make a profit. So it's like, okay, we have spaces available and we have to project as best we can the actual cost of it, but we wouldn't have gotten that revenue otherwise if we didn't have that student in, right? But I do want to be clear that the financial justification for starting a program is cost avoidance, that you would otherwise be sending students out and maybe transporting them further distances. There's also another part where these programs are being designed for students with intensive needs. And so there's a responsibility that comes to educating all our students, but students with intensive needs, I'm gonna say it's a bigger responsibility that sometimes comes with increased liability. So I'm not saying, I'm just sort of bringing that into the thinking that it makes sense for programs that we already have, and looking at space available and bringing students from out of district, other places in, and for tuition costs, that is something other districts do. I think that Dr. Schmuckler and I and Susan support this. But just to say more about, there is some liability and responsibility, so we generally don't start programs unless we're serving our needs of our students first, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Two questions, Dr. Wong. Why are we not allowed to make a profit? Is there a law that prevents us from making a profit?
So you generally have to have DESE be, if we were to make if you're trying to do it as like for a profit model, that's a whole nother level of scrutiny that would come from DESE. I think it's always been generally understood that that's not something, because we're primarily the public schools of Brookline, so I don't know what that means taxation wise or anything like that. I feel like that would take us out of this the tax status that we're currently in if we were to create a program for profit.
Well,
But what does that
okay.
mean? I'm sorry, I'm getting lost because like, does it mean that the program, I guess I'm confused what that means within this context. Can you explain about being for profit? Like, for example, if Rise costs us 8 million and we accept a student who is $100,000, the whole point is that the 100,000 is going to offset Rise. Like that one student, how would that student how would any students flip us into a for-profit status? I guess I'm lost on that part.
So the way we calculate the tuition costs is what it would cost, we actually cost us. You know, like if we take the number of teachers and what it costs for materials and our site, we shouldn't be supposed to be we're not supposed to be making money off of it. It's supposed to reflect the actual cost.
But the actual cost can still, like, for example, if you have 5 students in a classroom, just as a very vanilla example, and you have a teacher who costs $100,000, you can still allocate, say, okay, well, the students, we're now the teacher cost 25,000 before, and now they cost 20,000. We're still reducing the cost of the district, right?
So
Isn't that the idea?
what I read into, I think it was Cliff, because we can't see each other. I think it was Cliff by recognizing his voice. He was wondering if we have a unused classroom, if we should not start a program in that unused classroom. So now we're creating a model where I don't know. So I'm
Okay, I was
Yeah.
confused why empty
let me-
classroom was conflated with out of district revenue, because to me they're completely disconnected.
Let me say it differently. Okay, so let's say we're expanding Winthrop House. That there's excess capacity in Winthrop House right now, and we're expanding. We're letting it enough students to fill that operational capacity that we have. Would the district consider or think about expanding Winthrop House to more than just the capacity that currently exists? Not starting a new program, but just expanding on what we have right now, because you have the room to be able to do it. And understanding that's an investment in staffing and what have you. And as a second question, when you talk about cost recovery, how do you factor in the cost of the facility?
Or
That's-
general overhead of,
Right.
of running the
Right.
PSB.
I think they did the best. I think that is part of the calculation. But again, to opening a classroom that doesn't currently exist, that's all right. So when we're thinking about bringing in students into existing classrooms and the tuition costs that we would assess for that versus opening a brand new classroom, that means we're hiring a new more teachers, more related services. We're hiring more people to be able to do that. Now you run into, I don't know, benefits and OPEB liability. Like right now we're looking for slots with current staffing, to be able to add additional students. I don't know. So that could be an analysis we would do, but I just want to be honest, that is not something we are doing for FY27. For FY27,
Understood.
we're just initiating a tuition cost that we would assess for bringing students into current programs that have space available, slots.
No, understood.
Let me just say, I agree. I think that you'd be really biting off a lot right now to talk about new class, expanding into additional classrooms and hiring and so forth, at least in the next fiscal year. But I think, Mariah, your points about how costs get allocated are an issue that really needs to be probed a little bit more. If it's to say, look, it's simply the cost of the teacher, but the cost of running a program is more than the cost of materials and the cost of the teacher. There are a lot of fixed costs that are part of that, and overhead costs that are part of that. So I do have a question related to this, and that is, at one point we were talking about, and this is a different category of out of district. We were talking about the costs of Metco and materials fee, particularly in the context of providing special ed services. And Cliff, I don't see that on this list. Is that something that gets included under number 6?
This is a list that is not all inclusive. It certainly can be added to.
We had talked about those issues. Particularly, or at least.
So I guess the question is whether or not that comes into number 7.
Okay.
And there are things that we would recommend that the school committee do in order to come up with ways to help alleviate those costs, because ultimately it's really going to be a question of getting the state to do something, or whether or not there's any
Right.
leverage with Boston, right?
No, I suspect there's not, but it would be, I would think, a state issue.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
So number 7, it's really, there have been a lot of things that have been talked about, and they don't really fall into areas of analysis. But in a situation like this, we have the opportunity to make recommendations to the school committee and the public schools of Brookline about things that we feel they should focus on or do as sort of like best practices. So for example, and I know the school committee is doing this right now, the enrollment forecast, right? Instead of doing it internally, make sure there are periodic independent evaluations. Okay, so I know that that's happening right now with Crawford McGibbon. It's a great practice to have, and so sort of just memorialize that. Jumping down to D for a second, Sadaf and I spent some time with Dan and Charlie from the building department, trying to get a better understanding about the correspondence from parents in the spring, referencing the design of the classrooms at Driscoll, and how that did not necessarily, or didn't at all, correspond to what the building code. And so the recommendation, at least the recommendation that I would suggest down the road for this group to consider, is to recommend to the school committee that they instruct the building department to post in the classrooms what the legally allowed occupancy is in those classrooms. And that legally allowed occupancy is independent of whatever it is the school committee decides its class guidelines are going to be. So that you don't have a situation where you had last spring, which is where parents were complaining about something when in fact the school committee had every right to do what they were doing in terms of having a number of kids in the classroom.
I'm super confused.
Okay.
Like, so first off, why wouldn't the building department be posting legally allowed occupancy? Like, are they not posting legally allowed occupancy? Did they tell you they were posting something other than legal occupancy?
Yes, they're posting what you tell them to post in terms of.
Why would we tell them to post 24 in a classroom that has more than 24 people in it?
Mariah, I'm just telling you what they told me. All right.
Okay.
And from their perspective, you're their client and they do what you tell them to do. Right now, maybe that's stretching it a little bit. And let's be.
Chaz, are you here right now? Are you still here? Maybe he's not.
Yes, hi.
Okay.
I'm here.
Chaz, does the school committee need to direct the building department to post the actual legally allowed occupancy? Shouldn't building department be posting legal occupancy independent of what a department tells it to do?
This is news to me. So I need to get a little more background on this, but I will get back to you on it.
Because it makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable that then that would be implying that school committee could tell them to post other amounts, and we should not be determining occupancy of spaces, nor should any department. So I would appreciate that, Chaz. get
Find
I
us the
clarity.
will,
on this
language.
I will follow up. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry to be annoying, Cliff, but this one like
No,
gets
no,
at
no,
the
I'm
heart of
just-
something that to me is very important to have clarity on, and it feels like school committee is being told that it's done something wrong, that it was never in its power
you're
to
not-
actually.
There's don't make this out to be more than what I'm suggesting here, okay? What they're suggesting, what the building department is saying, look, we should post the legally allowed occupancy. By the way, they would adjust the legally allowed occupancy to account for Dan's estimate of what egress should allow. Okay,
Sure.
so okay, well that's different than building code. All right, and yet, look, you have a situation where the architect says the rooms were designed for 22.
Great.
Right, and yet building code allowing for egress would be more like 38. And yet that's not posted in the room. Okay. And so you have a disconnect. And all this recommendation really is to say, okay, let's get rid of that disconnect.
For sure.
And you have the
But the recommendation says that school committee should be instructing them as opposed to they should be doing it. And those are very different things. It's the part where school committee somehow
Okay,
has an
all right.
obligation to
fair
instruct
enough.
them. Yeah.
Fair enough. Then we can massage that language essentially to say that the building department should and the school committee should agree, right? So
I
there's
would frame it a
I
little
don't
bit
think-
differently though, because this ties to the, for example, the after-hour building usage of town facilities. School buildings and other facilities in town are used for all kinds of purposes, independent of what PSB has for classroom limits. So if, for example, if another group wants to use a room, we should all know what the true building code capacity is for it. And it has nothing to do with what school committee's rule is around, or I'll say guidelines are around teaching of K-8 classrooms. So,
Well,
I think that to me,
okay.
this fits within the after our building usage question more neatly.
I'm not sure about that, but I will just say that I don't think the building department independently decided to not, put up.
Look, I
building.
think there's agreement that what should be posted is the legal capacity of the room. What I understand has been conflated is the legal capacity of the room and the policies, the school department policies regarding the size of classes in terms of number of bodies in a class being taught.
It's actually even worse than that, in that it came from, I think, a letter from the architect, which is
Correct.
less than our classroom guidelines.
Correct.
Right.
And that triggered
Questions.
parental
Yes.
issue. Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, as I'm listening to this conversation, what I understand is everybody agrees that the posting in the room should be the legal capacity of the room. And then Mariah, you would argue, and Cliff, I think you would agree, that the school committee could say, look, the capacity of this room legally is 38, but we only want 12 students in there as our policy. I mean, you could say that.
Yeah, or whatever the number is, right?
Yeah,
Right.
and I'm just using that as an extreme example.
Right.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. All right. Yeah, the other things, and the group could talk about them. Integration with Munis, generally trying to get the schools, the recommendation being to provide the same level of transparency with regard to their expenses as the town provides. And because they are substantially different. And I think that it would be in the school's best interest, because it would, eliminate the ability of people to ask questions and to jump to conclusions, yet we don't have that. So to me, that would be a recommendation. The integration.
Can I comment on that a little bit? Which is just that integration with Munis and level of transparency are not,
are
like,
two
one is not a
different
sub
things.
of the other.
Yes, you're right. You're right. You're right.
And the highlight of that was the rec department revolver, which I thought was excellent. And that was just all Excel charts that had nothing to do with Munis, and it was well done. And it should be that level of transparency. And it has nothing to do with Munis. That's all.
Fair. Fair. I think the thinking was Munis provides better transparency than whatever it is that the schools use now. And so that's how it got there. The point is the little I, right?
Yes.
How to get to the little I.
Right.
Departmental integration to the greatest extent possible. I know that this is something that the town and schools are working on, continue to work on. I don't know what the answer is, but if there's anything that can be done to integrate things and potentially have efficiency savings, then that's the recommendation, really. The CLA report, I know I mentioned this at the futures meeting, I think a couple of weeks ago. My own personal, and this is mine, all right, my own personal recommendation or suggestion to this committee and to the full committee is to suggest that CLA be brought back to actually evaluate what it is the schools have done in response to the issues that CLA raised. Because all we've heard is commentary from the school committee and maybe some folks from the PSB, and that's not an independent view. So I think it would be worthwhile, again, for the community and for the schools, for CLA to come back and essentially say, yeah, they've done everything that we suggested that they do.
So are you saying that the agreement between the town and the schools was not what should have been done?
I'm saying that I personally would like to have an independent view of what's been done. People don't need to agree with that. I'm putting it up there on this piece of paper. That's what the paper's for. People can decide whether or not they agree with that or not. But that's certainly something that I would put in front of the subcommittee and the full committee.
I will confess ignorance here, and that is, I know that there was the agreement which I've seen between the town and the schools, or the MOA or MOU or whatever. Has there been any appraisal of whether the steps have been completed, begun, not completed? Mariah or Chaz on that?
I will start answering, and Chaz or Bella can fill in. So there was some things that were already being done that the document said we will continue to do. And I'll give an example was preparing quarterly reports, and that the document said those would be explicitly sent to, I think it was advisory and select board, and now they're being explicitly sent. So those processes are already happening. Most of them were in the continue, like we'll continue to do X. And then some of them were things like, and Bella, of course, jump in, but it was things like the town and the school staff will work together to look at how to better integrate some of the Munis modules for the benefit of both town and school, that sort of thing.
Okay. So
So this is Bella. Cliff and I meet regularly. Actually, really rely on those meetings to stay in sync. And we are adhering to the items of the MOU. I wish we were further. I think we actually had thought we would be further on the integration of Munis. We've just had changes in staffing that were not anticipated, but actually it's still our goal to get there on that. So that I would say that's the only item on the list that we're not where I thought I'd be or we would be in January. I'm not, I don't know if Chas is still there.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that assessment. I think it's not for lack of trying on either of our parts. I think both Bella and I meet on a regular basis. Dr. Wong and I meet on a regular basis, and we're very much, both of us are committed to making that Munis working group a success, to the point raised earlier about having that integration. So it is definitely not.
Yeah, I feel our working relationship has been very productive. So I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Maybe not as fast as I thought, but we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Just trying to find the MOA to just review the.
Yeah.
Yeah, was there some language at the end of it that said and such will be reviewed?
Well, and now our website just got redone and the link I had is dead. Boo.
Yeah.
Hold on, let's see. Here it is from October. Let's see if this one works. So the items were PSB will provide, here, I can pull it up on the screen. Wait one sec. I will try to pull it up on the screen. So it's, as I mentioned, providing quarterly reports to the school committee. That was a continue to. And that those reports are sent to the town administrator and school subcommittee, continuing their 5-year revenue and expenditure projections, establishing a working group to address Munis, as we just discussed, delegation of functions, which is essentially like curtaining to make sure the right people have the right functional access, continuing to have written contracts for purchases and services and to bid, continuing to send at least one employee to MCPPO, which is like, I think, public procurement organization.
That's right.
Yep.
Going through our financial policies and documenting those changes by March 1st, assessing all central office functions as part of the FY27 budget process, provide a fall report about the OSS to the school committee, which was a couple weeks ago and was really, really well done. And that's essentially the.
So the second quarter report is going to be presented to the subcommittee next week. So we're on schedule, right? So it's January. It's going to be ready for 1-2 school committee.
So I'm wondering whether these items are discrete enough, Cliff, that it's necessary to have CLA come back to check them off, or whether there's either an up or down that can be decided internally by the sixth floor, by the PSB, by us, by whomever.
I mean, I think from my perspective on this, the whole point of the MOA and the process is this, it's a rebuilding of public trust, right? It's a confidence measure. And I absolutely have confidence in the superintendent and her team and all the work that she's done in the short amount of time that she's been here. to really develop these, continue the work that's been, done in terms of making sure that we are all, between town and schools on the right track here. But I think a big part of this subcommittee and this committee's work is, how do we demonstrate that to the public satisfaction? How can we make sure that it's not just my say so or the superintendent say so, or, people close to the movement, the day-to-day operations? How do we demonstrate to the public that we have identified these issues? We have, in many cases, resolved them quite swiftly. And in the areas where we're still working, we have a positive collaborative working relationship. So when it comes down to how do we demonstrate that, I think we rely on the committee and the elected leadership for guidance. I can say it, and I can show the work that we're doing, but I want to be sure that you feel confident and that the public feels confident that the work that we're doing is being reflected out into the broader population, and people feel confident that the folks doing this work are making these strides.
Well, I will say that we certainly have not dug into these issues at this point. Nor do I know offhand whether the MOA completely exhausts all of the recommendations made in the CLA report. I assume that it does, all or most of them, but I don't know that for a fact. And I don't know whether that suggests bringing CLA back for a quick look-see, or whether that puts another item on the agenda of the ENRSC that we really hadn't addressed to this point.
I've had a request from a member of the public, Sergio Mordigliani, to be able to speak. Unless there's an objection, I'm going to unmute him and let him make a comment. Okay.
I don't object.
All right, let me see how I get this done.
This concerned a prior item, which is no longer before you. Thank you. I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a tricky one, in my opinion. I've been listening to all the conversation. It's in my private work in some healthcare space with compliance and just also general IT stuff. It's always tricky to have certifications that aren't certified by independent certification bodies, right? So my initial thought is, yeah, this totally makes sense from what Cliff is saying, because if we had the auditors come in and do a report, then they should come back and verify the report, and I would then go forward and say they should come back every year and do the same thing. But I realize that this isn't private sector, and that we have a different, in government space it's a little bit different. I do think that having even the run through that we just did of looking at everything that Mariah ran through and said, are we doing this? Are we doing this? Are we doing this? It does feel like there should be some review to that level that's done beyond the ad hoc way that we just did it, which was sounding in a lot of ways great, in that we have good working relationships between the school and the town and that sort of thing. So I hate to not have something in here. I'm not sure if independent verification again from the same company. I guess that's what I'm stuck on. Is it, obviously that would cost us some money, that will take us some time. Is it worth it? I can't really come up with a great which way I would fall on this one, but anyway, just some of my thoughts to add to the conversation.
I don't know how much it would cost either. I can't imagine it'd be a lot, but what do I know?
Yep.
Given the community reaction in the spring.
Yep.
And, I don't know how well the community generally understands what's going on. I don't think many people in the community know about an MOA or what changes have been done. If an independent party came in and, came back and said, gee, you're doing everything we recommended, kudos to you. The Brookline News is going to pick that up and they're going to publish it. And then the community is going to know that things have been addressed. Absent that, you're really just talking about trying to get word of mouth out there to convince people, right? That's all. But, it does cost money. There's certainly time. I would think there's certainly time to do it. It's not going to be going through an exhaustive audit again. They're just sort of checking, and to have it happen and on the same time frame as we're finishing up the work of the committee, might dovetail nicely if there was a desire to do it. So,
yep.
So I'll leave that in, I guess, for now. Yeah, for Chaz. And where the subcommittee can come back and talk about it at another point in time.
Well, and the superintendent and I haven't had this particular conversation. So I think before we kind of go one way or the other, like I said, we meet regularly, so we'll sit down and talk about this too. I understand everyone's comments on this, and we'll see what we can do. But I also want the school committee to be able to weigh in, because it's matters under their jurisdiction, right? It's not me, and it's not Bella. It's the school committee at the end of the day, and that needs to have the buy-in here. So we can talk about it. We can see what we can do, and we will report back.
Yes, thank you. I would appreciate the opportunity to talk about it with Chaz. So
Sure, of
you.
course. Okay. Anything else for this evening?
My out of district students issue is under 7, I guess, as we discussed, so we can plug that in at some point. So, okay.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to just add was that from all of our conversation and from taking the minutes, right, it seems like everything that we had on the list is staying on the list. I just wanted to make sure everyone agreed with that assessment. That's what I wrote down. And then under 7, when we had these ones are a little different, right? In that they're not the analysis piece per se, but more of the should we include a recommendation? That they all kind of read as we were trending towards saying, yes, we should have some recommendation for them as well. So I just also wanted to make sure everybody agreed with that before I send out the draft. So
and I want to take back my comment that I
I thought about that earlier, Dick, and I was like, damn it, I should have went for it. So anyway.
I'm glad you did.
Look, there were no votes taken today about anything. So
right.
These just suggestions being put out there. Even if they get into a draft write-up, things might stay, get taken out. Just food for thought, really.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Have fun.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, enjoy the rest of the year, guys.
It'll be a long one. So
take care.